Good evening, everybody. And if you're just tuning in, thank you so much. You are listening to the Angel Rock on United Public Radio Network out of New Orleans, Louisiana. If you're listening to the show and you want to watch the show, please go to UFO Paranormal Radio YouTube channel. We're on various Facebook channels, such as the UFO Paranormal Facebook page. There's Joe Montaldo, UFO Undercover. It's on my profile, Lorilei Potvin. We're on Twitch under the same name. And we're even on my YouTube channel tonight under the Angel Rock. And speaking of that, I should introduce myself. If you're returning, welcome. And if you've never been here, thank you so much. I am a Canadian psychic medium. I'm a crystal Reiki energy healer, Akashic Records practitioner. I'm a spiritual teacher and mentor. And I'm even adding activist to the list. And last but not least, I'm also a registered nurse. And my show, I say, cover all aspects of the supernatural, from UFOs to aliens to the paranormal. But then we also cover all the things under the light worker realm, which I consider myself as well. So the power of the mind, power of positivity, chakras, energy. We're going to be talking about that tonight. And I have some of the things. Astrology, which I'm not well versed in, and a lot of us in the light worker field, it seems, aren't. But boy, have we got a treat for you tonight. So my guest this evening is named Dave Petrella. He's an astrologer, biologist, spiritual guide, and Oak Island theorist. I have lots of questions to ask him, and I haven't asked him personally because we've become friends because I wanted to ask him on the show. He's traveled to all 50 states and most of Canada doing research. Dave has studied world religions and spiritual traditions extensively, along with Eastern medicine, metaphysics, and my mouth's not working tonight, metaphysics and topics related to extraterrestrial intelligence. Dave is available to teach any of these topics and to do birth charts and other astrology related assessments. I always give my guests time at the end of the show where to find them, but just in case, you can find Dave on Instagram or even on Facebook under his name, and on Instagram it's Dave Petrella 12. So welcome, Dave. How are you?
Hi, Lorilei. Good.
Hi. You're being all
How about
quiet
you?
now, shy. I'm fine, thanks. We had a quick chance to say hi. How are you? I do want to give a shout out to Joe Montaldo too, who owns UPRN. He has many great programs on our show. As I mentioned, UFO Undercover on Wednesday nights. He does the Gray Zone Uncensored with our fellow Canadian, kind of famous TV person, actually, Michelle DeRoche. She's lovely. They do that on Saturdays. We have the Centralist. We usually do a host panel with. The paranormal panel was this evening. I wasn't able to make it. I'm usually on there. Hello, Steve-O. I was thinking of you guys. I was going to give you a shout out, so I'm glad you're here. I want to send my deepest condolences to Steve-O, and especially to Kelly Hopkins. They're fellow friends of ours. They are Canadian paranormal investigators, and very sadly, she lost her cat this evening that was 17 years old. So I send my deepest condolences, prayers, and love. His pets are family, definitely. So thanks, Steve, for being here. Okay, Dave. Okay, this is the question I have been dying to ask you since I've known you. And there were a few things you were going to tell me because Dave and I get on the phone and we're like, for hours, like hours. But I didn't ask you this because I saved it for the show. What got you into astrology? We're going to talk about your other stuff, but what got you into it?
Yeah, sure. Well, I really started off with biology, and this was it goes all the way back to
Okay.
probably fifth grade, a
Mm-hmm.
very long time. And you and me were talking about, even when I was in fifth grade, I was reading texts that were probably you could be considered close to medical manuals,
Mm-hmm.
essentially. I'm
Yeah.
picking up things, I'm understanding the diagrams and everything. So and that was probably when I was like 10 years old. So
Mm-hmm.
that was kind of the beginning of everything. And then what happened is, kind of like a little bit down the road, probably 10 or 15 years, I started to get into the esoteric side of
Mm-hmm.
biology. And when that happened, now I'm starting to look at the same medical diagrams and the same descriptions in a way that is according to essentially Eastern medicine principles.
Mm-hmm.
So for the most part, India and China.
Right.
And what ended up happening was I was looking for something very specific, Very hard to find. I actually didn't even know if I would find it, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
I went on YouTube and I said, this was in 2010. It was a while ago. And I typed in the cerebrospinal fluid because
Interesting.
it's exactly because
Mm-hmm.
it's supposed to have mystical properties. And you can
So that's
see,
something you get samples of that, Dave. I can tell you that right now. As a nurse, right? Like even when we do a spinal tap, that's pretty precious fluid. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off, but
oh yeah,
interesting thing to look up.
yep, absolutely. So, and that came after studying the chakra system for probably, actually, I'm trying to remember here. Or was that before? No, that was I'm sorry. That was 2015. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So when I searched for that video about the cerebrospinal fluid, that was 2015.
Okay.
Now, in 2012, that's when I started to study the chakra system.
Okay.
So then 3 years after that, then what ended up happening was I said, okay, so now these texts are talking about the cerebrospinal fluid in connection to the chakra system,
Right.
which of course the chakra system is based on the spine. Well, it's really the spinal cord, but it's the spine in general. And so I said, okay, I need to look into this. So I went onto YouTube. I searched in that, I put esoteric after it or something because I didn't want just regular medical information. I was looking for something very different, in fact. And I found someone called Santos Bonacci. Some of your listeners might be aware of him, have heard of him, watched some of his programs. He does a lot. Well, he's an astrologer.
Mm-hmm.
He's an extremely good astrologer. He does a lot with flat Earth. He does a lot with social awareness and justice. And I'm trying to remember what the term is, but basically like the rights that we have as humans and how that's separate from corporations and all this nonsense, things of that nature. So he does a lot publicly with that as well. But anyway, so the video I found that about the cerebrospinal fluid was his video. And of course, I had no idea who he was in the beginning. And over on the side, when you see YouTube, the side column has the listed videos. These are suggested for you, etc. Well, on the side, it said almost everything I saw was about astrology. And I said, you know what? Like, this is probably a good time for me to take a serious look at this because, I am a scientist. I've been a scientist really since I was 10. I mean, that's really what I would say. And been serious about it since I was 10. And I said, all right, so some people say it's science. Some people say it's pseudoscience. So I said, all right, what we're going to do is we're going to apply the scientific method. Like all good science, you need to use a scientific method. And let's see if I can find patterns. Let's see if I can duplicate what I'm finding. And let's see if it's something that's reliable. Because if it is reliable, then it's moved into a different category. And now if it's, as far as I'm concerned, obviously people are free to have, and they're going to have their own opinions. I hope that at the end of the presentation tonight in our conversation, people will be looking at it a little bit differently because I teach it as a science.
Right.
And as such, I'm using mathematics. I could sometimes, occasionally I do. I really don't do a lot of it. Most of what I do is based on science and math. And it just so happens that I crossed over into, the mystical topics and the paranormal realm and things of that nature. But I don't, I'm a scientist. That's if people really want to know what I am, I'm a scientist.
Yeah, but are they really even, once you get into it, because I have a Bachelor of Science in Nursing of my degree too. I know you know that, but for our listeners. And when I started all this too, something had to make sense with science before I would really look at it. And when you start getting into, quantum science or physics or however you want to define it, that's when you don't get into quite the concrete stuff. But a lot of this stuff can be related back to the scientific method. There's something scientific to it. And so I can see why you went there. Like it would make sense having a scientific mind. And then especially, I've got friends that are numerologists, that are mathematicians, really into physics, and numbers don't lie, right?
That's right. Yeah, they really don't. Even if I wanted to, after I had gotten into astrology for even after the first 2 or 3 months, if I wanted to say, okay, I'm not doing this anymore, I couldn't forget what I just saw. and that you can't forget these things sometimes, especially,
You
as
can't
a scientist.
unsee them. You can't
No, you
unsee them,
can't.
right?
And if you do, then that's you're really dropping the ball, in my opinion. And this is not just about astrology, this is about anything. If you see information, you see things that are presented to you in a clear, concise way with good supporting evidence, and you can draw a conclusion, and then you can repeat what you just discovered, then you have to take it seriously. Otherwise, you're being, I would just say, illogical.
That's a
It's
good word for
something
it.
that Exactly. It's something that, you can deny anything you want, or you can, support anything you want. But at the end of the day, if you're seeing things that seem true, and it's everyone's free will to do so. But I'm the type of person where, whether I like it or not, if the data is pointing to that, that's what I'm going to be working with.
Yeah,
And
I
then the
think
question is why.
exactly. But you know what? Actually, it's so funny you say that, because I just said this on a couple of shows ago, that everything even going on now, there's two questions to ask ourselves. Why? And the other one is, when you're given this information, whether you want to be asleep or you maybe just purposely are asleep, maybe you just are asleep due to fear, whatever it is, we have to ask ourselves, based on what? Right? And that's anything in life. Based on what? Where is the hard, concrete science? Where is the hard, concrete research? Is this repeatable? And then when people start taking pictures or live video or what have you, yes, I know with today's technology, yes, things can be, you know, manipulated, but especially with live video or what have you. And this relates to anything right now, especially though with what's going on. Now, the one thing I want to back up a little bit, because we've got people from all over the world listening to this. Now, some people may not understand what you call it, a chakra. I call it a chakra. There's nothing wrong with either way. It just depends how you pronounce it. But for people listening, if they don't know what that is, do you mind sharing with them what it is? Hi, Rainbow Light
Yep.
Paranormal.
Yep.
That's Kelly.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Kelly
Okay.
and Steve-O
So,
are watching. I don't know who else. We've got 8 people watching. So if you're out there, say hi, guys, so we can say hi. We like to get questions and involve people in the discussion. Dave's going to be teaching us tonight, and I'm really grateful for this. So go ahead. I hope you guys are too, because he's quite interesting. He's got a really unique way of looking at astrology and teaching it, and so on. Right, Dave?
oh yeah, absolutely. Okay. So the chakra system is let's call it the energy highway in the human
I
body.
like that. Mm-hmm.
And what that means is that all of the energy is sourced from that. It's essentially, it's a straight line.
Mm-hmm.
That's something. So if someone's ever saying there's all the esoteric references to, like, the narrow road or the straight road or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
like all of these things. And by the way, anything that looks like a for instance, from the Bible, when you talk
Mm-hmm.
about the staff
Mm-hmm.
is the same thing, the
Mm-hmm.
same exact thing. All of these traditions, all of these mythologies, at one point everyone knew, well, it's actually two things. It's the spine,
Mm-hmm.
and then the corollary is it's also the planets and the stars, and
Interesting.
they match up perfectly with each other,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why astrology works, because it's coming down from the sky,
Mm-hmm.
and it comes into your body at the chakras, which I'll go actually explain that a little bit more. People that are familiar with yoga, that's most of the people that know chakras probably know it from yoga. And the
Mm-hmm.
chakras are the 7 energy circles, or they're really vortexes of energy
Mm-hmm.
along the spine. And it starts with red at the bottom and then ends with purple at the crown or at the top. So if you see someone in like a lotus position with the 7 colors going up the center of their body, that's what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And so what ends up happening is that all of the energy comes in there. And actually, we were talking about this the other night too, Lorilei. The solar
Mm-hmm.
plexus comes in, the baseline energy to power your body functions comes in from at the solar plexus, which is the third chakra.
Mm-hmm.
And then, well, it can technically come in anywhere, but I would say the most high power, mystical energy that comes in, it's coming straight through the crown of the head, which is the
Yes.
seventh chakra. So technically, it's coming in multiple different places. It's obviously, it's a complex system, but So anyway, that's what the chakra system is. And what I wanted to say, I actually want to get back to astrology, if you don't mind. Well,
Absolutely. I just knew
they're the
people
same
might
thing,
hear
really.
that and go, what the heck is that?
Yep, yep, absolutely.
Hmm.
Okay, so what ends up happening is that I find this video I'm looking for on YouTube,
Hmm.
and the person happened to be Santos Bonacci, and of course, I didn't know who he was at the time. And what I ended up doing was I found several of his videos, I watched them, and he really hit a absolute home run. And I said, I can't believe I literally was never the same again after that day. It was January 2015. I'll never forget it. And I literally like pretty much fell off my chair because this has existed in very not very detailed form, obviously,
Hmm.
since the beginning of time. And at the time, I was, uh, well, I guess probably late 20s, mid to late 20s.
Hmm.
And I'm just saying, okay, well, if I saw this when I was 18, then guess what that would have meant? That would have meant a completely different trajectory for my college education, for trying to answer some of the hard questions in life. Um, things would have really started to make sense to me, Lorilei. And that's
Hmm.
one of the things I'm trying to do is to get it in front of people just so you can see it,
Hmm.
just for the first time to see it, and then let it sit there for a while, and then see what you want to do with it. See when things start matching up, you see the system works. It's really, really exhilarating to see that. So anyway, I said, all right, he did such a good job that I'm going to watch his astrology videos.
Hmm.
And I was, trust me, very, very skeptical because of everything people always say about astrology. And I'm like, okay, well, you know what? I'm going to do a very thorough research project with this. And like I mentioned before, I did the scientific method with everything.
Hmm.
And after, I did my own well, not really most what I do. I do all kinds of astrology, but a lot of times I focus on birth charts, which is the conditions in the sky at the exact moment that you were born. Because the planets are always moving, the stars are in different places, and that influences. And this is actually the big argument between astronomers and astrologers, is that what they do agree on is that, okay, yeah, we agree that Mars was sitting, up like at this degree in the sky from this location on this date. And then astronomers say, yeah, but it's just hanging out there. And astrologers say it actually is, it's doing things to the mental construct of Earth and to the mental
Interesting.
construct of humans and other
Hmm.
animals as well.
Interesting.
So that's the big schism between that. Um, so anyway, I watched them. I did my own chart. I did my friend's chart. I did my family's chart, and then I decided that okay, there's something going on here. And I had like, again, it's one of those things. It's like I didn't necessarily want to believe it. I didn't even really want to study it. It was something that was given to me. It was kind of one of the last big pieces of completely missing esoteric information that I needed, something I had never been exposed to, and I had to give a chance. So I gave him a chance, and he's since become my friend. And he does excellent work. I would encourage anyone to watch any of his videos, and sign up for some of his classes. He just started a new school, a new mystery school to do all the teachings, the ancient teachings, and
Okay,
he's
so is
just a great guy.
Santos's name? I'm taking notes so I don't forget because I know
Yep.
we were going to. I always say the show is always about my guest, and it is. But I have questions too that I haven't asked you.
Oh yeah, yeah, of
So
course.
his real last name is Bonacci
Bonacci. Yep.
or
B O
Bonacci.
N
Okay, you know why? Because
A
that's
C C I.
all that it makes me think of is like the Fibonacci
Right.
numbers or sequence. Isn't that odd, right? And we're talking about, even though they aren't directly related, what I'm saying is there's mathematics involved with astrology. And he's just, I don't know, I don't believe in coincidences. So it just seems awfully odd that, the last part of his name matches up with the Fibonacci sequence.
Oh
So
yeah. Yeah, and
I don't
of
know.
course, I believe in no coincidences, probably much like you do.
Hmm.
And I mean that's a good topic too. It's a valid topic, talking
Hmm.
about the structure of the natural world, basically. A lot of
That
it
might
being
be next show because I know we're not going to have time, but I wrote things down here that were kind of triggering as you were speaking because of sacred geometry and and it's in everything on this earth, the spiral, the whole bit. Maybe that'll be our next show, Dave, who knows, but I'm going to give you the floor because I
yep,
know you
sure.
brought these great diagrams and I'm really excited because, like I said, how many people have I had on since you've watched my show that every one of us that are in the light worker field have said, well, astrology is not really my thing. Like, I know a little bit. And here's Dave, who's like the astrology wizard. So you have the floor, Dave.
Okay, great. Yep. Well, it's a really big responsibility, and if I never did anything else in terms of teaching something, well, I would teach two things, which is what I've always done: teaching about the human body, not the Western knowledge. I'll let the medical doctors do that. You guys can do that, and I have a lot of respect for doctors too. I can't patch a broken femur. I can't do stuff like that. If someone breaks their bone, yeah, the hospital, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. But if you're talking about the maintenance of the body, like for instance, preventative maintenance, you need to understand a little bit about chemistry. You have to understand a little bit about fasting. You have to understand how energy moves through the body. And, basically the wisdom from India and China is second to none in terms of energy in the human body. So if people want to understand that, seriously, just go straight there. Absolutely go straight there. And China does it a little differently than India. And I've actually wondered about how some of those ideas passed. And what I think actually happened, maybe one of two things. The first thing is I think that when the true beginning of India's civilization began, I think it was actually an island floating in the middle of the Indian Ocean.
Okay.
Maybe not the middle, but somewhere in there. And I think that a lot, or maybe most of Asia was maybe pagan, just based on what I've seen from what's been dug up in China and Korea and Japan and just in Russia, all over there, everywhere. And then I think when India made its landfall and created the Himalayas, of course, there's going to be huge debate about this. One of the things people understand about me as we continue to talk is that I don't believe in the typical, the traditional timelines for human history or human geography or the dinosaurs or anything. Really.
I'm beginning to go down that, as we had our discussion the other night too, about time and timelines and dimensions. And and I don't think what people realize is how much history, just even the history, from the last 100 years has been changed, and dates and what have you. And never mind how many calendars we've kind of flipped over, over the ages. And who knows, we might, I've even heard the theory that we're not even in the time, like the year of what we think we are, that we're actually 1,000 years, what am I say, younger than what we've been told. But the only thing, the point I'm trying to make is it only takes about 3 generations for history to be changed and people to believe that whatever they're being told is now the truth, right?
Yeah, that's right. And that's why, go to the ancient texts, go directly to the ancient texts. If you want to read a commentary afterwards, that's fine, you know, but go to the primaries. I'll tell you what, one of the best things that happened to me in high school, because there wasn't a lot of knowledge that came out of that I still use, to be quite honest.
Very honest, yes.
That's unfortunate, but that's true.
That's true.
But one of my teachers, his name is Dean. I don't know if Dean's watching, but Dean. He was my AP history teacher. And AP is advanced placement, so it's an advanced history course. And the thing that I will never, ever, ever forget, and I'm so thankful to him every day for this, because when I was 17, as a 17-year-old, you don't have the mental development. You don't even have the exposure yet to be able to put the stuff together.
Or experience, right?
Or the experience, correct, yeah. So anyway, what he said was, he said that, first of all, find the bias. So if you pull up like 5 different sources, read all 5 of them and see if there's a bias. Is there a reason that this person's writing this way? Are they a scientist? Are they a politician? Are they a doctor? What are they? And then after you've compiled as many, and what he says is primary source documents is like the first iteration of that information, essentially, close to the first. So get as close to the beginning of when that information appeared, and then find as many of those sources as possible. And then you want to compare them, and you want to find the bias. If you're able to do that with anything, you're way ahead of the game. And this is not even with just science. This is like life, Lorilei.
I was just thinking everything, even in the last 2 years.
Yep.
if people could do that. But you know what I said, and I'm gonna repeat it. I don't think I've said it to you before, but I truly believe the year of 2020 was just not the what a unveiling, I'll say, of what happened, what we're going through, CV-19, but it was the death of logic, critical thinking, and basically recognizing within one's own self that we have free will, but we don't have to have a leader to follow. Every one of us, we were getting into biology here with our physical bodies, has the exact same things. So we have a brain, we have a subconscious, we have a higher self, we have all these things. We are quite capable of thinking for ourselves. And when you just talked about what your teacher Dean taught you was a valuable life skill. No wonder you never forgot it, because that teacher's gold, and what he gave you was gold.
Oh yeah. And he's, you
Mm-hmm.
know what? I'll tell you what, he's got all kinds of awards and he deserves them because
Yep.
he's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic at what he does. I'd never had any teacher anywhere make that statement,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
I
and I
haven't
just
either.
couldn't believe. Oh, it's absolute genius. Absolute genius. And
Mm-hmm.
yet it's a tenet
Yep.
of good science, actually, if you wanted to bring it
Mm-hmm.
over to the science arena.
Mm-hmm.
Because, well, anyway, I won't go into science now, but that part of it.
This is what
So
happens when we
anyway,
start talking, Dave. There's so many things we
I
start
know.
talking about. You guys don't want to be a fly on the wall when we're talking, because like we're all over the place, like talking, because we have so much stuff in common, but different aspects to add to it. And yeah, right, Dave?
Right. Yep. Yep. Right. But you know
Mm-hmm.
what? Since you brought up 2020, actually, I guess I'll just touch because we still got plenty of time.
Oh, yeah.
This, I have a slideshow I want to show everyone and to show you too, Lorilei, and
Mm-hmm.
that probably won't take more than half an hour. And then
And that's
after that,
fine, because we want to
oh yeah,
leave people with stuff, even if they've got questions, Dave, because we want them to find you. And I want to get into
yes, right,
birth
right,
chart and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, we'll go wherever we
yep.
go. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well let me just talk about 2020 really
Mm-hmm.
quickly. The first thing I have to talk about in reference to 2020 is 2012. Now,
Interesting.
most people, I'm sure, are familiar with that date. That was the end of the Mayan long count calendar. The Mayans were absolute masters of timekeeping.
Mm-hmm.
It is astonishing that they were able to do what they did.
Mm-hmm.
And again, from my description, I do a lot with extraterrestrial intelligence. I
Mm-hmm.
do believe that they had a visitor, probably many visitors, and who taught them the sciences and the arts and all these things,
Mm-hmm.
because I literally, there's absolutely no way that anyone could figure this out. You don't have enough time unless you're like doing something like channeling,
Yeah, I was
possibly,
thinking that. Mm-hmm.
or you're a shaman. But
Mm-hmm.
apart from that, and I'll go into it when I start explaining astrology, but you don't even have enough time to see even a fraction of the cycle. There's a huge time cycle that we're in with astrology. And you don't have enough of that time to be able to see where the planet is
Mm-hmm.
at the 150-year mark because you're not alive.
Right.
So you either believe what the people who came before you said, which
Mm-hmm.
again, as we know, that's probably been changed because it always happens that way.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Or you have to get, I feel like they had the knowledge given to them pretty much all at the same time. And it was like a divine gift that came from the heavens.
Mm-hmm.
So in any case, 2012 is supposed to be the end of the Mayan long count. And a lot of people believe that it was the beginning of the age of Aquarius. Now, what happens between the ages? Now, there's 12 ages. There's one for each sign of the zodiac. Most people know what sign you are. The zodiac. It's called, what I do is tropical astrology. It comes out of Egypt. But then, of course, there's Vedic astrology, comes out of India. Then there's
Mm-hmm.
Chinese astrology, which is actually based on the year, and it has different symbols and different animals and everything.
Right.
And I'll tell you what, they're all good. They are all accurate if you have someone who knows what they're doing. And the way to describe it is that it's depending on how you frame it. And based on how you frame it, you're going to be able to pull out different types of information.
So
So if I want to,
it would almost be really beneficial for someone, it sounds like, theoretically, not that this would probably happen, but to have, say, a master in each one of those types of astrology, because like you said, they pull out different bits and pieces, especially if they were
right,
like
right.
doing something with the world even, right?
Oh,
Like,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I've thought about becoming proficient in Vedic astrology and Chinese astrology. But you know what? Honestly, I have my hands full with Western astrology.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much here. It's astounding. Every day I learn something. And you know,
Mm-hmm.
you just, when you think you have a really good handle, and I do have a very good handle on it.
Mm-hmm.
But even just yesterday, I was doing some work
Mm-hmm.
for a client, and I said, and I actually woke up. I didn't even have a chance to tell you, Lorilei. I woke up this morning
Mm-hmm.
with a divine source of guidance, because
Interesting.
I forgot to do something the night before.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, wait a minute. And it literally, I wasn't thinking it. It just happened. It appeared in my head. And the first thing I did when I woke up is I went to investigate it. And it turns out that it was something I needed. You know, that's a nice thing to have. And when people, like I mentioned before, if people question, how on earth did we get this information, whatever it is, it's not necessarily that it gets passed between cultures or that there's like a time continuum. You can, and you know, and people in the paranormal world, I think they probably all understand this, is that you can pretty much channel anything, any information. It's all available in the ether. I know you do work with the ether. It just depends on what you're given granted access to and how well you're able to focus and things of that nature.
Well, okay, so you call
anyway.
it the ether. I call it the Akashic record. So when I actually usually don't do Akashic record readings, because what I find is I pull everything in when I do a reading. Now I find that works the best, coming from all the different aspects that I do. But if I was doing an Akashic records reading with somebody, I actually take them to what's called the heart space. It's not the heart chakra, it's the heart space. So I guide them to that. We go into the records, right, at once we ask permission. Then when we go in there, they only tell you where you're at. So they're not going to give you information, say, that you couldn't handle, meaning the global you, or you couldn't process. But how I've been taught to do it is we ask questions, and it's followed by another question and another question and another question, right? To keep getting deeper and deeper and deeper, because they're not just going to give it to you, who I'm working with. And it's not because they're playing keep away or you're not allowed to have access. It's your Akashic record. It's just you're going in there, you're seeking knowledge, you're seeking answers, and that's how it works. And the best way we find it works, you can just work individually with many that are up there, and there's ascended masters, there's, I've been taught there's angels, there's all kinds of stuff, but collectively seems to be the best because you get quite a bit of feedback and information versus just working with one individual. So anyways, I wanted to throw that out for people so they knew that. So that word can be used interchangeably, people, like ethers, Akashic records, whatever, right?
Yep, I would agree with that. And the other thing, since you mentioned the heart, is that ether and heart are essentially the same word with the letters in a different order.
Interesting, an anagram almost.
Exactly. And when you, Santos, again, is absolutely phenomenal with this. In fact, this is how he claims he put together a lot of the information he did. Is he speaks many different languages. He grew up in, I'm trying to remember, I think he was born in Italy, but his family grew up in Italy regardless. Anyway, he speaks a bunch of languages, and when he started looking at words, he said, okay, well, this word is like telling me what this other word means because I have access to these other languages. So you can see where things come from depending on how they move through the languages. And also the very wonderful things from that you will find is that you can find a lot of lost information that's actually hidden in that word. So if someone's like, well, I don't, yeah, there you go. So if someone says, oh, I don't believe that, or that's where that came from, I'll say, well, then tell me why this word is in the same place, or it's had the same indication across like 10 or 20 different languages. Tell me how that happened.
Or the other thing is, okay, especially because I speak 3 languages. I know we talked about that on the weekend, but they're all based off of Latin, which they consider to be an old or dead language. But I've never been taught Portuguese. I've never been taught Italian. I've never been taught a lot, but I can understand a lot when it's spoken or when I'm reading it because they have the same basis. But the point I'm making here with this to support what you're saying, Dave, is a lot of times too, say, for example, French would be one of my better languages I speak, is that there's words in French that can be synonymous with, say, English, but not really. There's a lot more to that word that really there isn't an English translation to be able to bring it across, is what I'm saying. So I think it's important, the point that you meant too, that they go across different languages, but different dialects or different languages have a lot more meaning to the word depending on what word it is. So there's a lot of knowledge packed in, I guess, is what I'm saying, which is really interesting.
Exactly. And actually, that's one of the things that to this day is still coming up with Bible translations, is that someone says, I mean, you know, you really, if you're going to be doing that stuff, you really have to know like Aramaic and Greek and English.
Yeah.
So not a lot of people know all of those, and not just to know them, but to be very proficient in them. Then, you know, by the time it gets to like the King James Bible or something, then you're like, okay, wait a minute. That's not when if you have all of them next to each other, you're like, wait a minute. That's not translated. Yeah, it's not translated correctly. That can be because of ignorance. It can be on purpose to manipulate the information, which again happens all the time. There's many different reasons, but yeah, I agree with you 100%. Is that you can find out so much of the information inside of these different words, and get really exciting when you discover. But so in any case, I guess maybe okay. Let me finish. I'm sorry, man. Let me finish the statement.
I get Dave going all over the place, guys. Sorry.
It's all good. Okay, so I just wanted to talk really quickly, and this will come into play probably towards the end of the slideshow too that we do. Is that supposedly in 1963? Okay, and when I say that date, I hope some of the listeners are maybe from that generation or before that, and that around that time you had this sudden, just massive shift. Now you could see it in starting a little bit in the 50s, but it was very weak with the beatniks.
Yeah, hippies. Yeah.
Right. They were like the pre-hippies. So, but they weren't full blown. I mean, it was the 50s was still very conservative.
Oh, 50s. Okay, yeah, gotcha.
50s. Now, when you get to the 60s, right around 63, and you know, I'm sure there's plenty of people that know a lot more about this than me because they lived through it. But you suddenly, out of nowhere, literally, just felt like out of nowhere, you have things like the Beatles. You got this flower power stuff going on. You have this hippie movement, all the social rights activism, and all these things. Where on earth does that just come out of nowhere? How does that just appear here? You didn't even see like a lead up. Suddenly, everyone's like talking about these topics and dressing up like this way. How does that happen? Okay, well, I'll tell everyone how it happens. Is because in 63, you had an alignment of, I believe it was pretty much all of the planets in the sky. It was a very, very powerful alignment that happened, which means essentially that they're in a straight line, is what it means. If you were observing it from down here. And that ushered in what's called the buffer period between the age of Pisces and the age of Aquarius. And the buffer period is supposed to be about 50 years long.
Okay,
so
that makes sense.
For you to get from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius, you need, without destroying the planet, essentially, you need some time to do it because the shifts are absolutely massive. And which is actually what probably most people alive now actually have lived from 63 to now, have seen these shifts, and every decade has something completely different, and this huge technology boom and all these things happening. Again, and actually that's when the big technology started to kind of, you have the 60s with the moon. Right.
Go ahead, and then I'll add what I was going to say.
Well, so anyway, 2012 is the end of the buffer period, roughly. And that's when you have completely left Pisces behind, the age of Pisces. Now, the age of Pisces, Jesus came in at the year 0, which is the beginning of the age of Pisces. He's associated with the fish oftentimes. That's part of the big reason why. There's actually like 20 different things I could probably say about that, but I'll just leave it at that for now. So then when you come into Aquarius, which is the age of man, it's the water bearer. And by the way, the water, I read this recently, the water, because a lot of people think Aquarius is a water sign. It's not. It's an air sign. Some people believe that what's in the picture that Aquarius is holding is actually ether, because it's like a water, but it's like you can't see it. You know, if you go, well, not just necessarily ether, it could even be air. If you pass your hand through the air, you feel some resistance. Like there is something kind of semi-solid when you do that. You can feel it. So anyway, that's probably air or ether inside that picture. But 2012, let's just say beginning of Aquarius, the Mayans knew it. They never said it was going to be the end. They said it was essentially going to be a new beginning, a new paradigm, complete paradigm shift, and they kind of just left it at that. But actually, it's a lot more than that, because it's not just. And I'll go into the cycle of it's called the Great Year. It's called the precession of the equinoxes. That's what determines which age you're in. And like I said, we're in the age of Aquarius now. But in any case, what you see is that the age of Aquarius, if you know anyone who is an Aquarius person, they match up perfectly. And so what Aquarius means, just in case anyone is wondering, it's about futurism. It's about humanitarianism. It's about machines, specifically machines made out of metal. People who are Aquarius and Capricorn people tend to like things that are metal, and they like heavy machinery, stuff like that. Because of that, metal, machines. Aquarius is also the age of inventions. It's the age of the space race. All of these things, progressivism, all these things we see just so happen to be happening at this exact time. And not just now, but it had been leading up to this too. Now, what I would say is that I think it actually might have been 2008, the actual beginning. Anywhere from 2008 to 2020, I would put as the official beginning of Aquarius. I don't really know, because everything went absolutely insane. It's starting, in my opinion, starting 2008. So
was there anything defining? Was there anything defining that you can think of, Dave, when you say everything went crazy? Just so people know. And I want to give a huge shout out to Inner Peace Healing. They said just in time for the Aquarian.
Oh, great
comment.
Okay, so I'm sorry. What was your question again?
Sorry. So when you said that, so the age of Aquarius basically ushered in anywhere between 2008 and 2020, right. But you said it's hard to define when, because everything went crazy. So is there anything significant that you could possibly think, and I'm putting you on the spot, I know, so if you can't think of it, it's fine.
Oh, no, I'm already ready. I'm already ready, Lorilei. I'm already ready.
Well, anything significant you can think of when you're talking about everything kind of globally going crazy that...
Well, in 2000, actually, let me just say this. The first thing, and I was still very young, so I had, again, limited perspective, was 9/11. That was number one for me.
Okay, 9/11, yep.
I don't think we've ever seen anything like that happen.
We haven't. No.
And it was shocking to the entire world, and it still is to this day. And I send so much grace to the people who were involved. If there's anyone listening, it was such an awful thing that has occurred. So in any case, that's when I started to say, wait, maybe this is not what I think it is. Maybe this reality is not quite what I think it is. Actually, I was asking that question when I was probably like 3 years old.
I didn't say it, but we talked about it. I knew it would come up, but we both said the same thing. We've been asking those questions as far back as we can remember as very small children.
Yep, right. So anyway, but then by the time 2008 came around, with the big financial crisis that happened, where no one could find any jobs. I live in the United States, in case people are wondering. So, and I remember myself, because I lived through it. It was very hard to find jobs. I was interviewing, and they're like, we don't really have any work. We can't even hire you, even if we want to. And that to me was the first time that it got kind of maybe a little bit scary in the outside world, because for me personally, my own experience, I'm like, well, maybe this is not as stable as I thought it was. Maybe the financial system, the social system, the government system, whatever. And then by the time, by the way, now 2008 was when I had my revelation. That's when I stepped into the spiritual world permanently, in terms of I had permanent interest in pursuing these things. It's also, I believe, when Santos, the same year, 2008. And that's kind of, I think, when the Aquarius energy just completely just busted wide open. And then the further you go into it, the more you're pulling from Aquarius. So anyway, that's what I want to say.
Is that when I did, Dave, because even though I knew I had these gifts, I didn't have a label on them. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, I decided I wanted to learn more about angels. I think that's when I took my certified angel card reader course. Like I had no idea why I did the things that I did. And I think it was around that time too. So that's interesting that you bring it up. I've never thought of that before.
Yeah, and you know what? It's just one of those things that, like, I have a thought, I keep it permanently in the back of my head, all
Mm-hmm.
the thoughts I've ever had,
Mm-hmm.
in case I need to pull on it or pull it to see something. And that's the thing is that, like, I said, wait a minute. When Santos said 2008, I said, wait a minute, there's something going on here, because for it to be the same year that we're making these absolutely massive, profound discoveries, and it's happening at the same time, that has to be generally, I would say it has to be something cosmic. It's
Mm-hmm.
not like just one or two people. And then the more people I talk to, they're like, yeah, like just like you said, Lorilei, they're like, actually, that's when it started for me as well.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And it
and
came
if I
out of
was,
nowhere for me. Like I always say, what do tattoos and angels have to do with each other? And it was actually, well, let's see. I was 40. That would have been about 17 years ago. So it might even, let me think, 17, well, not quite 2008, but I think I did start looking at all this stuff in 2008. I started questioning things. I started, things weren't making a lot of sense. And I'm not an overly religious person. I was raised Roman Catholic. For people that think that I'm a godless person, I'm not. It's not that it matters what, you can think whatever you want. But I had a real, like I said, I don't know if it was an awakening or what it was. It was like this pull. And you're right, it has to be something cosmic, that all these people that don't know each other, but, have met many years later, and we all look back to that time and have all made a massive shift.
yep, that's what it is.
Hmm.
And, well, actually, no, no, I'll save it because I actually want to get into the presentation if we can.
Sure. Well, let's just address this or mention this. Inner Peace Healing says, I had my near death experience in April 2006 as an Aquarian. That was the start of this age to her, she says. So interesting.
Sounds good to me. I mean,
Hmm.
and again, that's 2 years over 20, almost 26,000 years.
Hmm.
Um, I'm completely fine with that. And actually, it's got to get me thinking now.
I know. That's why I pulled it
That,
up. That's why I pulled it up.
you can't bring something up to me or to you without it getting us thinking.
Hmm.
But 2000, I actually graduated high school in 2005.
Hmm.
And when 2006 started, well, for me, it was because I had left my hometown and I was in college, and that was the big shift.
Hmm.
And I think it was just more awareness for me. So it's probably, maybe I wasn't quite paying attention enough or what have you. But in any case, even if it was 2006, that's still only 14-year bracket out of
Hmm.
26,000 years.
Hmm.
That's good enough for me. I
Hmm.
tried to, I'm as exact as possible when I can be. I'm as precise as possible. But if it's enough to approximate something to get what I need from it,
Hmm.
then I say, okay, that's good enough. And I'm able to move on from that, because
Hmm.
that is good enough. That's like 2 years difference.
Absolutely. Okay, so Dave's got this good presentation for us, guys. He's got a bunch of slides. What I'm going to tell you ahead of time, if you can't see them on the screen, we always have the archive and the replay up on UFO Paranormal Radio YouTube channel. It'll be on my Facebook page. You have, all over the place. I mentioned at the beginning of the program. So if you have to go back and pause it to take a look at the pages, please do. Right, Dave? At least they'll be able to look at it if they can't see it on the screen.
Yep, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
And what's nice about that too is since it'll be it's going to be archived in video form,
Mm-hmm.
right, Laura? People
Well,
can.
it is. Well, we are covered with our archives anywhere where there's talk radio or podcasts. We are carried our shows. So the only video places though will be like YouTube, and on Facebook. Twitch will have it. But we also upload our videos. We're looking at other video streaming platforms. So yeah, but even listening to it, or maybe there's a way Dave and I'll talk about it afterwards. We'll be able to put these drawings up if Dave is comfortable with it. We'll put them up for you guys so you can access them if they can't see it on the screen. Is that okay with you, Dave?
Oh yeah, that's totally
Okay.
fine. I want
Okay.
people to what I
I know
want
you do.
my hope for humanity. I have many things that I hope
Hmm.
for humanity, but one of them is to get this let's order this and get this straight so that people can see it presented correctly from someone who is a scientist and he's using data which can be replicated.
Right.
That's my angle with astrology. So I want people to see you can count on this. Now, some of it, when you're going into interpretation, it can get all wild, because if the person's not good or they don't know what they're doing, then they're going to be wrong, or they're going to be inaccurate or whatever, or they're going to be using it improperly. Astrology has been accused of being black magic since probably the beginning of time by certain groups of people. And you know what? You can use it for that. I'm just going to be straight up with people, and that's not a bad point. Now, the way I do it is there's nothing but good that comes through it. And I don't predict the future because I value free will above everything.
Well, plus it can change. That's why I don't, even as a psychic medium.
Right.
When somebody asks me something, if I will get an answer, say in a reading or what have you, I will say in this moment. And the way I explain it is, if it's been shown to me, like your usual pattern, say, meaning the global you, for people listening, is that you always get up at a certain time, the same time every day, grab your coffee, leave the same time for work, jump in your car, and you head down the street, turn to the right to get to your job. Well, then, okay, so when, say, I give you something supposed to happen in the future, that morning you wake up late, you stub your toe, you don't have time for coffee, then you get out to your car, you've got 3 flat tires, whatever, so then you got to call an Uber and you got to go a different way to work. My whole point is that anything can change in the future with free will, with timelines, time dimensions, all kinds of things. So that's why I don't like to tell people what's going to happen in the future. If Spirit gives it to me, I will, like I said, say it the way I need to say it, but I'm not going to tell you most definitely this is what's going to happen.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. And it's hard to reconcile that when you start doing astrology, because it's very shocking how much is true. Which really, when you pull up, for instance, a birth chart, in fact, all of it's true, but if something's off, the interpretation is off. The person who the interpreter is
okay,
off.
so show us how you do it, Dave. I'm all excited because I didn't get Dave to show me this. We're friends, and there were certain things I didn't ask. There's a million things I want to ask him that I saved, but I know I'm going to have Dave on many times after this. Yep. So go ahead.
Okay,
Dave.
well, I do want to say this really quickly, though, while it's on my mind, because I think, one of the future shows, we could even do an entire quantum topic show, because one of the things that starts happening is, and honestly, guys, this is when it gets really weird for people who haven't had a much experience in the supernatural field or paranormal field. When you start dealing with quantum things and quantum structure in events and occurrences, everything kind of goes out the window, and to some extent, because the quantum world is kind of how you define it, or how it's being defined by a different entity or being or whatever. But what I want to say is that the way astrology, and you'll see this a little bit when I talk about how astrology is in the human body as well. It's something that most astrologers don't even know, and they certainly don't talk about it, most of them. But it's set up so that it's a learning vehicle, and it's also a karma vehicle. It's both at the same time. It can be, well, there's always going to be some kind of a mix. It's never just one. But what I want to say is that it's something where if you have a good understanding of how to move energy through your body, which is what we talked about kind of at the beginning of the show, then you can start to manipulate the quantum field. And when we talk about that, that's talking about, because if you're just doing, what I'll show you guys, you can see behind me the Zodiac. But if you're just living your life, like most humans live it, and you go to work and then you come home and you do something fun and relax or whatever, eat some dinner, and you haven't done any work on your body or with any fasting or meditation or anything like that, you're very likely going to be trapped. You might not feel that, and that's maybe not the right term always, but you're going to be subject to this very, very close to 100%.
Stuck is what I get all the time. I'm stuck. I'm at a crossroads. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know where to go. So I wanted to add that.
If you could harness your energy up to a higher gradient level, then less of this is going to start applying to you.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, one of the things that I noticed, and this is how biology and astrology comes together. I don't know if there's anyone else that does biology and astrology, to be honest. I've never met someone, because
Mm-hmm.
most biologists say, "Oh, this is junk. Put it in the
Mm-hmm.
trash can. This is pseudoscience." But you know what? I'm very proud to say that I'm a real scientist. I don't come in with preconceived notions when I go into an experiment. I literally say, like I said before, it doesn't matter if I like it or not. I'm going with the data, because that's
Mm-hmm.
science. That's how science works. But what I want to say is that if you see athletes, the people that are hardest for me to guess what sign they are, just at the first glance of them, are
Oh,
athletes.
really?
Yeah, oh yeah. And the reason for that is because they have so much, generally, especially high level athletes,
Oh, the
have
energy?
so much, yeah, so much. And what I'll say, Lorilei, is free energy
Right.
moving through their body, that they get to call a lot more shots than the average human. And you'll
Mm-hmm.
see a lot of times in the other aspects of their life, they have a lot. It seems like they have a lot of ability. Like there's a lot of athletes that are like really good singers as well.
Really?
Oh yeah, it's really interesting. Some of the, because they have the power, they have the physical power. Their structure is backing them up. The blood flow is good, the energy flow is good.
Do you find that with a nationality? And I'm not being racist or sexist or anything like this, but let's just look at the NBA, for example. It's hugely, largely African American, or I have noticed with African American people or people from Africa, whatever you want to, however you want to call it. How many people do you know? They just have a natural rhythm about their body, like when it comes to
Oh yeah,
music or singing or whatever it may be. Like they really do.
yep. No, I agree.
Hmm.
I compliment people often on that.
Hmm. Yeah,
In the African American community, I say, man, you have so much ability. I'm really impressed. I think it's
they
awesome.
do. It's like
Appreciate
a
what you can
natural
do.
thing for movement and
Yep.
using their voice or what. So that's interesting that you
Well,
notice that.
yeah, big time. And I'll tell you something else interesting
Hmm.
is that when you,
Sorry, that's my other phone. Sorry about that. I
oh,
was
okay,
reading the
okay.
comments. Hmm.
When you start to look at geography,
Hmm.
which geography really and geology, but for this point, I just want to say geography is that there's a lot of scientists that think that humans have been descended from, I believe, one woman in Eastern Africa.
Right?
And I thought about that for a long time. That's what I was taught when I was in school and everything. It's not necessarily a bad idea at all. In fact, at all. There's a
Hmm.
lot of good points to that. However, for me, to be able to, this is a really interesting topic, to be able to have such distinctly different appearances of different humans across the planet. I mean, some of them, and I say honestly, actually, I say this out of absolute respect. The
Hmm.
Aborigines in Australia, I believe they claim that their culture goes, it's minimum of 60,000 years. It might be up to 100,000 years
Hmm.
minimum. That they say, yeah, we've been here for that long, and
Wow.
you see their bone structure. It looks like they were, their line came from a very early human, and
Yes,
yet
I
they're still
agree.
here. And then you have, right. So I'll just throw this out there. Anyone who's wondering what I believe about this is that I believe that there were different groups of original humans on this planet. The word I'm going to use is seed. I believe they were seeded, many of them independently, on isolated land masses, maybe even on the same land. Well, it can go either way. I believe
Hmm.
it happened both ways. But the point is that I believe we're coming from different parts of the universe. And part of what astrology looks at is the fact that this might be some sort of an experiment. And it does get into extraterrestrial intelligence. I can take it there if I have to or if I want to. But the whole point is that there's something very structured and interesting going on here.
Hmm.
And if you talk to a lot of the natives in North America, because those are the
Hmm.
ones I'm most familiar with, I've worked with a few of the tribes.
Hmm.
Um, they will tell you that, I'll ask them, I say, well, where'd you guys come from originally? And how many of them say, we've been on this land forever? And I say, you know what, that's ridiculous. I don't know, this is actually not what I say, but 20 years ago, I'd be like, that's ridiculous. Like, come on, you came across the Bering Land Bridge from Russia, or how
Mm-hmm.
did this work? And now they say, actually, we've been on this land forever. And
Mm-hmm.
then it wasn't until much later when I started to pay attention to things like, metaphysics, really, I guess. And I heard some of these oral stories about the different gods of these different cultures and groups of people, and how they came down from the heavens. They brought all the knowledge, and they taught us all these things, these wonderful things to make us to make our lives easier and safer. And they gave us, the humans developed these elaborate costumes, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
not call it costumes, but elaborate dress. That it's like, how did you guys? And I understand. I mean, with artists, you can come up with anything, but they'll tell you, actually, if you ask them, if you say, why do you dress up like this? They say, this is what our gods look like.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not making it up, they're not making up, Lorilei. They
Mm-hmm.
mean that. They really mean that.
No, I agree. We
Okay.
have a
So,
very strong First Nations history where I live. I think I've told you that before. You haven't been here. You've been all over Canada, but you haven't been to Thunder Bay before, you
that's,
said. Mm-hmm.
that's correct.
Okay, let's get.
Yep.
We could talk forever, Dave, and we got about
Yep.
45 minutes, maybe a little longer left. I want to get your slides out here because like I said, I could talk to you for hours. You know that.
Yep. I'm ready to go.
Okay, so do you want me to pull up a slide, or do you want me to, where do you want to start?
Yep. Just pull up the one that says ecliptic path of the sun.
That's the number
first,
one, right? That one?
Yep.
Okay.
That's it. Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So what I want everyone to see, and this is the reason I'm starting with this, is because we all know that the year is 365. It's actually 365.25 days. That's why you get the leap year every 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
But let's just say it's 365. So the path of the sun every year, you'll see it's actually a sine wave. It doesn't move like straight or something. It moves, and again, you go to laws of nature and laws of physics. You talk about vortexes and how light is moving and things like that. There's a very specific, in the Fibonacci sequence, there's very specific forms that light likes to move in.
Mm-hmm.
And, I would say one of two things. It's actually technically both. It's sine wave, and it's also a vortex.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the path of the sun. If you can trace that, you'll see that center line that runs horizontally is the equator. The top line is the Tropic of Cancer, which is at 23.5 degrees north of the equator. And then the one on the bottom that's horizontal is called the Tropic of Capricorn.
Yep.
That's at 23.5 degrees south of the equator.
Okay.
And you guys are about to learn, if you don't already know, why they're called that. I had no idea, of course, when I saw this. Again, if I saw this when I was in middle school, then I would say, okay, that's why they got that name. Okay, now I get it. But instead, I had to wonder for 15 years because it never been presented.
And that
longer. To me is a true. Oh yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. And for my life personally, that's a true shame. Mm-hmm. So anyway, over on the left, that first dot, if you can read it, says spring. And spring it's the spring equinox. It begins with Aries. And what happens is the sun is moving up until you get to summer. And summer is at the very top. Now, summer is when you enter, summer begins in Cancer, the sign of Cancer, the Zodiac sign. So that's why it's called the Tropic of Cancer, because the sun is overhead on the Tropic of Cancer on that day.
Okay.
At 23.5 degrees north of the equator. Gotcha. Then what ends up happening is, now we're going through the heart of summer. You go through Cancer, Leo, and Virgo. And then the very middle of that diagram, you see fall. That's the fall equinox. You're back at the equator again. Mm-hmm. Equinox means equal night. It means equal night and equal day. It's a balance point of the year. And then now the sun is going beneath the equator, and it's headed for the tropic. And you begin fall, which is roughly September 22nd, 23rd. And then the next 3 months, you end up, you're in fall, and then you end up at the Tropic of Capricorn, because the beginning of winter is also the first day of Capricorn. And that's why Capricorn is down at that base level there. And then you're moving from winter into spring, you go through Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, and then you're back to where you started. So that's why I have spring on the left and the right, because not all you're going to do now is you're just going to repeat that sine wave. And that's what happens every single year.
Interesting.
That's what gives us, even people that don't want to do astrology, which, in some ways, I want people to understand this, but I'm very, very, very ardent believer in, do what interests you, try to be educated, treat people well, and I kind of leave it at that. But this is very important, and I actually do hope people take this seriously and can learn something from it. If you're not doing astrology, though, this is still what you need to know to plant your crops, in the ancient world, and not in even the not so ancient world. If you know when the spring equinox is, then you better get your plants in pretty quick. Otherwise, you're not going to have a harvest. You're not going to have enough time to have a harvest. So this was also life and death for people. To be able to know where the positioning of the sun is, and you can measure the sun's angle in the sky and determine all these things, etc. So that's this sine wave is where the zodiac comes from.
Okay.
And so you'll notice that, of course, now we can go to the next slide, Lorilei, if you're ready.
Yeah. Okay. Now I gotta remember number 2 is at the bottom, right?
It's the
This one?
Yep.
That
that's
one,
it.
right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. So now this one is what happens when you put those two, when you put the sine wave into a circle form, is that you actually end up with this picture. And I actually kind of already described most of what's in here, but you'll see the spring equinox on the left. The zodiac always starts in Aries. It always starts at the spring equinox. It's the resurrection. I wrote in there, it's the rebirth. It's where the word Easter comes from. It's where Passover comes from. All of these terms are referring to the equinox.
And spring is the beginning of new life, right? It always is, because you get everything. Most animals have babies, the trees renew their leaves.
Yep.
I got to ask you one question, though. When you're below the equator, though, how does this work? Because spring.
If you live south of the equator?
Yeah, south of the equator, like Australia.
Then it's fall.
Okay.
But this science was developed north of the equator.
Gotcha.
And, that's why the focus is there. And I also believe the Earth was created that way for a reason. That could be a whole different topic. But, you've got Egypt, you've got northern India, you've got China, of course, all above the equator.
True.
And even the Mayans is above the equator. Now, they're in the tropics, but that's still above the equator. Okay, so anyway, so what happens in the spring? It's, March 20th, roughly, March 21st every year, spring equinox. The sun is increasing in power. And that quadrant, that top left quadrant, is, in my opinion, the most powerful quadrant, because the sun is gaining in strength. And every day it's getting stronger and stronger, and you have more and more and more light as the days go on.
Right.
So people who are Aries and Taurus and Gemini are some of the most positive people you're going to find, because there's an abundance of energy that time of year when they were born. And so you get the top of that. You get, again, a summer solstice, roughly June 21st every year. Right. And that's when the sun is at the highest point in the sky. It's also when you experience the longest day in the northern hemisphere of the year.
Yes.
And that's actually where summer begins, but it's actually at the point where the sun actually starts to die. And when you look at mythologies and things and talking about, you can't get away from it when you get into some of the religious texts about the sun dying, or the death of the sun. Even the Celtics, the Celtics talk about it as the sun, the S-U-N, whereas the Christians will talk about it as the sun, the S-O-N. And I'm not trying to be offensive to people. That's one of many meanings. Again, there's about 20 or 30 things that I could associate with this. But it's important to understand that this is always behind everything. Because this is where we live. This is the backdrop. You don't not have a spring one year. I mean, temperatures-wise, maybe, but you're always going to hit like March 21st. And it does have a meaning. So now as you're going to that top right quadrant, you actually end up going through the death of the sun starts on June 21st. So the hottest part of the year is in the summer, but the sun is getting lower in the sky every day. So the power of the sun is decreasing. That's why if you go outside in June, and if you're in the tropics, it doesn't really matter a whole lot. I haven't really spent much time there, but I'd like to experience it. But if you go outside on June 21st in the northern hemisphere, the sun is like blisteringly hot, even if it's only like 75 degrees Fahrenheit. It's like you can't stand there. because it feels like it's just destroying your skin. If you go into the midsummer, the mid like say mid Leo, so August 6th or 7th,
Mm-hmm.
then it's very hot temperature wise, but the rays of the sun are less powerful. So it's a completely different experience. Now, as you're going down, you end up you're going to hit the fall equinox, which again, it's equal night, equal day.
Mm-hmm.
And the beginning of fall is roughly around September 22, 23.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the sun has already been dying for 3 months, starting
Right.
the summer solstice. But you still have another 3 months of the sun losing power.
Right.
So the summertime, the upper right quadrant, is not necessarily happy for the sun because it's dying,
Mm-hmm.
but it's still warm and it's still pleasant. Now, when
Mm-hmm.
you hit the fall equinox, that's when things really start to switch. Now it's still dying, but now it's going to start to get cold.
Right.
And what you end up with is you go through those 3 signs. You're going to pass, of course, Halloween, which was yesterday.
Yes. All Saints Day
And
today. Happy All Saints Day to those that celebrate.
right. And the reason for, and I've actually read varying accounts. Some people believe, or some people celebrate in different parts of the world this season up until about mid-November.
Yes.
I put it at November 7th, which is that if I had to celebrate it, if it was up to me, that's when I would be out there celebrating.
Okay.
Because November 7th is the exact middle of the fall season.
Oh,
And
okay.
because of that, the sun is very isolated from other influences, meaning that it's as far away from the summer as it's ever going to be in the
Mm-hmm.
season. And it's still a decent distance away from the winter solstice, which is the birth of the sun. Not the rebirth. The rebirth of the sun is a spring equinox. The birth of the sun is a winter solstice. So
Okay.
it's a very low energy time, and that's why it's associated with death, and holidays have to do with that. The sun is, it's cold. The sun is dying. You're entered Scorpio, which is the sting. You feel the sting of the scorpion because the
Mm-hmm.
cold is not necessarily pleasant, especially when to some people it is, but when you come out of a hot summer and suddenly you get stung by Scorpio, and around October 22nd or 23rd, it's a pretty big shock, and
Mm-hmm.
and then
Not
you
if you
have
live where I
Halloween
live.
a week or two after.
You just
What's that?
expect, not if you live where I live, you just expect it.
Right. Although you
Mhm.
had a good bit of warmth, right? This fall.
Even now, we usually have snow on Halloween night, almost always. We had about 30 seconds of a few flurries last night. Like
Oh, okay.
today, I was outside in just like a shirt like this. That's almost unheard of for November the 1st in this area.
Hmm.
Excuse me. Hmm.
Okay. Well, what ends up happening is now you're leaving Halloween, and you see I
Okay.
wrote death of the sun over there. And when you hit December 21st, around that date, you end up. It's the beginning of the winter solstice. It's the first day of the winter solstice,
Hmm.
and that's the birth of the sun. So
Okay.
what that means is that now the sun, and by the way, if you go out, if you're not necessarily outside, I can feel the shift. It feels like if you're in a car and you're going forward, but it's slowing down every day, and then it stops, and then it starts to slowly go backwards. So imagine putting your car in reverse. It's actually probably
Hmm.
the opposite. It would be the opposite for in this illustration, but say everything's
Okay.
going backwards. Your car is going backwards from the summer solstice all the way to the winter solstice. Now it's going to stop for what I believe it's 3 days, but I believe it's actually 3 1/3 days, which is part of where 33 comes from. If people are familiar with that number,
Hmm.
and again associated with Jesus the Son, the SUN and the SON, both.
Hmm.
I personally believe both happened. Not everyone believes that. Some people believe one or the other. I believe it was both.
Hmm.
Um, People have to understand that the divine intelligences, they work on multiple levels of understanding at the same time. They're also working through multiple dimensions at the same time, and they ascribe different meanings to different levels. So you might only see one level, but no, there's probably 10 or 20 sitting there
Hmm.
if you have the eyes to see it. Okay, so 3 1/3 days after the winter solstice is December 25th, and that's why we celebrate Christmas on the 25th. on the 25th, for 3 1/3 days, the sun does not move, meaning that you don't have, you're not gaining any light. It's the same, roughly the same, very, very close to the same sunset and sunrise those 3 days. And then on the 25th, now you're starting to see your days actually getting longer. At the beginning by a couple seconds, and then the more time that goes up, it's speeding up, and it's gaining more and more every day. So even though when you're in the middle of winter, which is like February 7th, roughly, it's again, which is actually pretty much the coldest time of the year in the northern hemisphere. It's when you get the scary temperatures, generally, that last for, in your case, probably weeks, I guess, right?
No, actually, when ours start, a lot of times right around Christmas, definitely in January, usually the second week in January, right into where you're talking about into February. That's when we can get into like -40 to -50, 55 with the wind chill. Definitely. And it lasts weeks, you're right.
Yep, that's it. So anyway, but the good news is that the sun is actually increasing in power now after the winter solstice. What that means, and you will feel it if you pay attention to it and you're sensitive, it's like I said, it feels like the car just stopped, and now it's starting. Now you put it in not in reverse. Now you put it into drive, and now you're starting to go forward, the opposite direction, and you feel it. Now it feels like it's supporting you, and it's giving you energy. It's not taking away energy from you, like the other half of the year is. So anyway,
is there
that's
anything
just,
to
the birth of the sun, and you're back to.
Oh, go ahead.
What?
No, I was going to ask the people that suffer from seasonal affective disorder or SAD during the winter, because just what you just said there made me realize that would make a lot of sense physically why people suffer during the points where, the energy is lower till, like you said, you get to the solstice, then you're starting to move forward, right? And you said February 7th is the middle of winter, and then it's almost like you're driving forward, and then it seems to lift with more sunlight. That would make sense, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's all how much energy you're getting from the sun. The center of astrology is the study of the sun. Well, it's a study of a lot more than that, but when you're talking about the thing that most affects us every day, is obviously it's the sun.
Yes.
There should be no argument there. Anyway, so then you're back to the spring equinox on March 21st, roughly again, and now you have the rebirth, which is, it's like an upgraded, highly upgraded energy upgrade from the winter solstice. So you're still gaining light, but now you're like, everything's starting to grow now. That's the most positive quadrant is from March 21 to June 21. That's if you need to do, for instance, a big project and you need an energy boost, do it during that time. That's what I would recommend.
Okay, I'm writing that down. Best time for a project.
And of course, it also depends a lot on the birth chart, but we're not going to really go into birth charts a lot today because we got to get the basics of astrology down. But okay, we can go to the next slide, Lorilei, if you're ready.
Is that the chakra one you were telling me about?
The next one is the Zodiac, the big Zodiac one.
Oh, the big Zodiac. Hang on. Crap, I think it's, is it this one or is it the other one?
Yep. No, it's
that one. Okay, good.
Okay, so now this is what people have probably seen before in relation to astrology. If you've seen something that has to do with astrology, this is called the Zodiac, of course. It's a perfect circle. There are 12 signs. There's 12 signs of the Zodiac. That number in numerology becomes extremely important. And what you end up with is, again, if you actually overlaid the previous chart onto this one, it's the same orientation. So over on the left, you're, you'll see Aries and Pisces. That's the spring equinox. And then, of course, you have between Gemini and Cancer, summer solstice, fall equinox between Virgo and Libra, and then the winter solstice between Capricorn and Sagittarius. So these are the associations that happen. They're really what they are is they're primarily mental associations that happen in the mind with people born during these times of year. Now, I just mentioned, to tie in the body a little bit, there are 12 cranial nerves for any doctors out there, nurses. And what I would say is that it's one for each sign. The energy, and they of course, are integrated into different parts of the body, the 12 nerves. But when the energy is coming from, and these are constellations, by the way, in case anyone's confused.
Mm-hmm.
All the 12 signs are constellations. So the energy from these stars and the star systems are
Mm-hmm.
coming into your body through the crown of your head and into these 12 cranial nerves, and that's where it starts to influence your perception and how you process things. And that's where astrology, that's where kind of where it starts, is when it enters that crown, the crown chakra. Okay, so you can see all 12 signs. Like I said, always starts in Aries. The first sign of the season is always called the cardinal sign. That's the sign that leads off the season.
Mm-hmm.
So those are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. In my opinion, those are the most powerful leaders of the zodiac. If you have an idea and you want to get it done, usher it to them, and they'll take care of it with no question. They'll be able to take care of you, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
The signs that are in the middle of the season are called fixed signs.
Mm-hmm.
The fixed signs are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. They all tend to be very, very stubborn in their beliefs. They don't like to be moved, and it's because they're right in the middle of the season. And in the middle of the season, you're not having a lot of, it's stable. It's either warm or cold, or like hot or cool, or whatever it is. And then the last sign in the season is called a mutable sign. That's the one that has a lot of influence to be changed. And of course, that's Gemini, it's Virgo, it's Sagittarius, and it is Pisces. And these people are able to, they're mutable people. They can rise to the occasion, generally speaking. If something's asked of them, they can, if they have to change, they can, usually. They don't necessarily want to, but if you tried to make a cardinal or fixed sign change, I would just say good luck to you.
Yeah. Okay.
It's probably not going to happen. Okay. Now what you can see is on the outside of this, you're going to see I wrote the different planets. The different planets, it's what's called a rule over a specific sign. So when you're looking over on the left, you see Mars. Mars rules Aries. Then you got What's that, Lorilei?
No, I was listening. No, go ahead.
Okay. Mars rules Aries, Venus rules Taurus, Mercury rules Gemini, and you go all around the wheel. Each of the signs also has an element associated with it. You've got either fire, earth, air, or water. And they're all very important things, and they're all helpful to be able to direct someone where they're going to have the most success. It's also very helpful for matching people up, whether it's a relationship or a business partnership or friendship, any of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's the general zodiac, and hopefully it's starting to make sense to some people why they're where they are. We can move on to the next one, Lorilei.
Okay, well, you got to remind me now.
Okay, it's the human body chakra system.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, I thought it was. It's that one?
Yep, that's right.
I thought so. Because when I uploaded them, they didn't go in order for some reason. So we went over this before the show, guys. So I'm trying to go from memory what one goes in what order.
Yep, no problem. Okay, so now this one, the zodiac is what's happening. Well, it is happening in your brain, but it's happening in the sky. Primarily, it's happening in the sky. I guess I could say it that way. Meaning that what I just showed you, the previous slide, was the stars and the planets. Now this slide is showing you how that interacts with the human body. And I also wrote in the different chakras, or chakras, however people say that. You've got the 7 colors. The 7 colors are each associated with a particular planet in a particular order. It's very important that the order is correct, and I wrote the order there. And then also they're all associated with a specific metal. This is how everything comes together with the natural world and the metaphysical world, and all the patterns they're lined up in a very organized fashion.
Okay.
So what you end up is that I wrote the numbers to the left. Actually, I'm trying to think the best place to describe. Yeah, let me no, I'll just describe it here. It's fine. Okay, so the bottom 7 chakras are associated primarily with the physical world. And part of the reason that you're going to know that is because all of the 7 chakras, they exist within your body, within the human body. Now, I fully believe, and I've studied this for an extremely long time, that there are actually 10 chakras. There's actually 3 above your head.
Okay, so I got to
And
ask you something. I've been dying to ask you this, but I didn't want to
yep,
interrupt.
yep.
So because part of Crystal Reiki is, and I need to make a video to show people how this works, but we balance chakras. So what I've always been taught is we have the Earth Star chakra below our feet as well as others. And then above the head, like you've said, it starts with the soul star and above. So I agree with you. Now the ones below the sacral or red, or sorry, root, I apologize, root chakra. You would have one below your feet called the Earth Star chakra, and so on and so forth. Plus, they're also discovering, as I understand it, through science that look at these kind of things, other chakras, such as any orifices in the body. So we're talking about ears, we're talking in the hands, we have chakras. I know that for a fact. Things like that. So does that interrelate with this all, or we're just dealing with the main core? Because I believe the way I describe it is humans are meant to run energy and be in balance, right? That's one of the reasons why I believe it goes right through the body. Go ahead.
Well,
Sorry, I hope I didn't get off topic here, but
oh no, actually, that's the next slide. I'll show you where the Earth Star it actually is located, and I'll show you where the Soul Star is located in a second. But anyways, you go up. That's why I drew a line. You guys can see it across between 7 and 8, because that's actually what's separating the immaterial world from the material world.
Right.
Roughly. I would actually say you could technically probably draw it between 8 and 9, but for these purposes, I'll draw it between 7 and 8. Okay. So in the eighth chakra, which is above your head, what you end up having is that's where the mind.
Okay.
Excuse me 1 second here. Okay. Can you still hear me, Lily?
I can hear you. Yeah. No
okay. I'm
problem.
sorry. I had an interruption on my phone. Okay. So
No
the
worries.
8th chakra is where the mind starts to interface with the human body.
Okay.
So actually, before it comes into your head, it's already in a form. It's a mental form that's an invisible form to us, but it does exist. And then when it gets into the skull, then it manifests into those 12 cranial nerves, and now it can interface with the physical world. The mind, that's where the mind comes into the physical. And that's also where you're going to find the Zodiac and the fixed stars. And the fixed stars are all of the stars that you see in the sky, and they don't move independently like the planets do. They move as a unit. That's why it's called fixed, because they move as, like I said, they move as a unit together around the pole star. They're not moving independently like the planets are. Now the ninth sphere is what is called the dream world. And when you're talking about for instance, since I mentioned Australia before, about the dream time, that's where it's occurring. And this is a place where there's a very limited form, generally, and very limited structure. It's where things are being puzzled out to figure out how I want to put this together. Meaning, how do I want this to actually come into fruition? What do I want it to look like? How do I want to design? For instance, let's just say there's an extraterrestrial in the ninth sphere, and they're saying, I want to design a new flower. Well, what it's doing is that in the ninth chakra is that it's working through these forms. It's, maybe it drew a circle, and it's like, no, it's not going to work. It's going to draw a square, and they can just erase it. And then when they're ready to go and it's ready to materialize, they send it down to the 8th chakra, and that's when it becomes a pattern, like a fixed pattern, let's say.
So it's like a place of creation and manifestation, right? Like the plans for manifestation, it sounds like, in the dream world.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's exactly what it is. Yep. It's a very powerful place where we can learn. And it's important to take things seriously there. And then the 10th chakra is what's called freedom. And
I like that word.
You're above. Yeah, this is true. This is true full freedom. You're not part of any system, any construct. There's really no structure unless you want there to be. You can move freely through the universe. You can get out of our solar system. You can go visit other star clusters or galaxies, or do whatever you want. Go through wormholes. You can change your body. You can change your appearance.
Okay, I just came up with something. Sorry, not to cut you off, but I just had this.
Yep.
So we're talking about, we were talking about heart and ether. You're talking about freedom, where we go in REM sleep. We can do all those things that you're talking about. right? You got the
Yep.
REM
Yeah,
REM letters right in there.
That's generally in the ninth sphere.
I get you
That
with
all
dream
that
world,
stuff.
but still, there's, like you
Yep.
said, with freedom, there's no construct. So how would you equate that to something that, say, somebody trying to understand then the difference between the dream world and freedom? How, where, when would you access this state, then the 10th?
Well, the ninth is, I mean, don't get me wrong, you're still experiencing a thrilling amount of freedom in the ninth. If your energy is, most of your energy is in the ninth chakra, you're going to feel it's exhilarating. But
Right.
guess what? You still have to come back to your body when you wake up. So the
Yes.
difference is that if you're in the 10th sphere, the following things disappear. Well, actually, everything really disappears unless you want it to be there. But the 10th sphere, there's no astrology, there's no planets. In fact, once you get past the 8th sphere, if you're in the 9th sphere, there's no astrology in the 9th sphere. That's why there's so much freedom in there. You're not your sign. You're not whatever sign you are. That disappears once you break into the break out of the 8th sphere. The 9th sphere is actually, we can go on to the next slide too, Lorilei. I'll just keep talking about this.
Okay, so that's the one with the spiral?
Yes, right. Yep.
Okay.
So this is the same thing that basically as the previous slide, except this is not in a table form. It's an illustration form.
Okay.
So you'll see the 9. I labeled them 10, and you're also going to see -1 to -10, and that's very important to understand. I'll get to that one second. But so anyway, the dream world. If you're in the 9th sphere, yeah, you're free from astrology, but I'll tell you what you're not free from. There's still one planet. Well, there's still two planets that have influence over you. And the planet of the 9th sphere is Neptune. Neptune is associated with the dream world. And you're going to be, Neptune is still watching you, making sure that you're within a small amount of structure. So that's why you're not fully free yet. And then the 10th, well, if you go to the 10th, then you're going to meet the creators of the solar system, and that's a whole different topic. I personally believe that the 10th sphere contains the planet Nibiru. That is my personal belief.
Talked about that, yes.
And those are the creator gods of the Earth system. This is not the universe. I'm just talking about this solar system. They created this, in my opinion, this solar system. So they're the ones. They're the last thing. That planet is the last thing before you enter the nothingness. Basically, the space between solar systems is what you're going to find when you leave the 10th sphere. So this model, and this is according to the ancient cosmology of really everywhere in the world. And I'll show you the last slide when we go to that. I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. But this model, it's very similar to Dante's model. People probably noticed that, of the different hells and heavens and etc. Well, over on the right, what I wrote was I showed you the 10 spheres, and I showed you each of the planets that are associated with it. I put Pluto. I put Pluto at the top. Pluto has been, that would be probably the astrological association, but because Nibiru is not, it doesn't exist in astrology. But I believe that's actually, that's the real Pluto, is Nibiru. I believe Pluto is just, like they're saying, an icy body in the far reaches of the solar system. So why did
they try and get rid of Pluto then off of the solar system? There was that talk about that.
They found a lot of similar objects that had similar compositions that were pretty close to the same size. And it didn't seem really distinctive anymore. The more they started of these bodies, they started to discover. But there is that planet X out there, which I believe scientists are pretty excited about, and I believe that's Nibiru. And guess what? It's invisible to our eyes, but it influences the orbits of Neptune and Uranus, and it makes them do weird things sometimes because of the level of gravity.
Yeah, but a lot of people are terrified of Nibiru, especially if they've heard all this stuff about that it's coming back and it's going to take over the Earth and all this other stuff, right?
Well, it's your Earth. It's the Earth, the creators of the Earth. So, in my opinion, and that would be the Anunnaki. again, in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion. We can go into that.
That's the next show. That's the
Right.
next show, because we had to go through this technical stuff, guys, to understand where we were going with the next. Like, we're going to run out of time. I know we are. We've got about, I'll say, about 15 minutes left. But I'll have Dave back, because there's so many things we wanted to talk to him about too. I want to ask him all about Oak Island. I want to ask him about a whole bunch of stuff. So we had to go through this because this is important. But the next visit, hopefully, we'll get a bit into birth charts and stuff like that too, and why it's so important, Dave.
Oh, absolutely. Yep. Okay, so the last thing I'll say, and then, then we'll go to the last slide, which will just take a second, and we can. I'd love to take some questions if there's questions out there, but about what we covered tonight, or anything really. But so you'll see 1 through 10 over on the right. What happens is that as you move up from, and these they have, like I said, they're counterparts to the planets and to the chakra system. The planets anchor the chakra system in the human body. Okay. The ruler of the first chakra is the moon. So the energies, yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of reasons for that, actually, and why that color is so associated, why red is associated with the moon, etc. So as you go up the chakra system, it's like I said, it's an exact counterpart. So as you're going up the spine, the energy gets higher, which ends up meaning the density goes down. And I believe that's something that's been proven in science, is that if you have, the more energy you have in a system, it starts to change the matter, the structure of matter. And it can do some really interesting things up until making it actually disappear. If it's vibrating fast enough, it will disappear. Object can disappear from our view.
Absolutely.
So decreasing density, your body will feel lighter if most of your energy is in the upper chakras. The planets 1 through 10 are called the heavens. And then what you have, because in the Earth, everything is dualistic. And so when you go beneath the Earth line, you end up with the hells. And the hells are the counterpart to the heavens. So there's also 10 hells. And it's the dark side of the moon. It's the dark side of Mercury. It's the dark side of Venus, etc. And when the ancient cultures talk about the axis mundi, or the cosmic axis, or the cosmic tree, or whatever, it's talking about this system. It's talking about your body. It's also talking about how the planets are ordered and how the stars are ordered.
Right.
But the Earth star that you were talking about would be at that -10 level, and that's equivalent to the center of the Earth. So that star is the molten star of the inner Earth. Some people might believe it's part of a hollow Earth, but either way, it's the gyre that powers the Earth and all the volcanoes and everything. That's in that -10 level.
Okay.
So all of these are all dimensions, Lorilei. So this is what's absolutely fascinating, is that you have beings. They don't have to all be human. They can be anything, actually, anything in creation, populating these different dimensions. There's including the Earth. In this diagram, there'd be 21 different dimensions. And you have, as you're going down into the hells, the density increases, and you lose. You don't have sunlight. For one, you don't have sunlight anymore, which is an absolute shock. So I think me and Michelle and Amelia from one of the other shows on the network were talking about the fact. I had mentioned that, like, if you're living in like the third hell, coming to Earth would be excellent.
Oh,
It'd be the first time you've seen sunlight, and who knows how many reincarnations. It's all moving up and down. This is when you talk about the angels and the ladder and Jacob and all this stuff. This is the ladder. It's the spine, and it's also the cosmic axis of the solar system. So
interesting.
Earth stars at -10, and Soul Star will be at a +10.
Okay.
And all the energies are different that you access depending where you are. But the last thing I want to say with the slide is that the Earth, the reason I drew it like this with concentric circles is because these are supposed to represent the spheres. And in the ancient model, the Earth was a plane. Plane means flat. And our planet has plane at the beginning of it. It was meant to mean flat. And what you end up having is the 10 spheres. They're in domes above the Earth. The Earth is, according to this model, it is equivalent to one of the flat Earth models, the ancient cosmology.
I've heard this before, yes, and I heard it today for some reason again. I did,
Oh,
out of a
great. Okay.
source I did not expect. I never told you that before the show. Something I did not expect, and it's actually been bothering me all day today. Isn't that interesting?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess we know why now. Well, we know why now that had come up.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
so anyway, the planets, they exist in each of their spheres above the Earth. There are
Mm-hmm.
domes that they exist in and that they move through. And then like in the ancient cultures, when they talked about the sun went into the underworld for the night and then it came back, I guess I would say it is actually technically doing that. I don't think that's even I don't really think that's a metaphor. I think that's actually happening because if let's just say that you have a flat plane in the middle of a vacuum called space. And
Mm-hmm.
then the reason I call this the Earth bubble model is because these are not just domes; they're actually bubbles within bubbles.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole solar system is a giant bubble of they're basically 10 bubbles within each other. It's like nesting Russian dolls.
Mm-hmm.
That's how the dimensions are stacked. And when you see one of the ways, I would say there's probably two good ways to explain this, but if you're getting um, beings or entities from other dimensions, one of the ways that they can be coming in is through these spheres, if they can find a way to penetrate these spheres. The other way is honestly, it's actually the more direct way is just through like it would be called a wormhole.
I was just
And you
thinking
don't need,
portals, wormholes, then we
right,
get into time if there's rips in time and space. Like I said, that's a whole, you and I have already talked about 20, 10 different shows we could do here, but you're right. I see that. Yep.
yep. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and we can go to the last slide, Lorelei, and then if I hope we have
Okay.
time for a couple of questions. Okay, so this is called El Castillo. This is the Great Mayan Pyramid in
Yes.
the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. And you'll notice that they knew what they were talking about. Now, this pyramid is the model of the solar system. That's the whole point. There are 10 levels.
Interesting.
There's 10
Mm-hmm.
levels to this pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what you end up having, well, of course, those are the 10 different chakras, the 10 different
Mm-hmm.
levels associated with the planets, etc. And the other thing that you have is on the sides, those are the steps, and the steps are on each side are 91
Mm-hmm.
steps per side. They represent a season each, and that top step would make 365. So they're showing you the length of the year, they're showing you the number of dimensions.
Wow.
And these are our ancestors, guys, so they knew what they were talking about. And I mean, I counted this myself. This was not part of a presentation about the spheres. I just
Mm-hmm.
started paying attention, and I said, well, anytime I see 10, now I know what it is, because this is the model, the model I use for astrology, and the model that most of our ancestors used was associated with the orbits of the planets, and then that mystery planet, in the 10th sphere, etc. I just want people to see that one of the best ways to get information is through leaving a monument or a picture or something. You don't need words. You don't need a text. I already know what
Right.
they're saying here because I'm counting. I count every time I look at something from the ancient world. The first thing I do is I count. I'm literally, and I have the numerological equivalents depending on what it is, so I know where to go with that. But I just want to say one last thing too, is that I was just talking with someone the other day about this. When you look at etymology again, where words come from, and you're talking about words like monument
Mm-hmm.
and testament and sacrament. Well, all three of those words are talking about the spine. Now, in the case of sacrament, it's talking about the sacrum, which you mentioned
Mm-hmm.
before, which is the first chakra.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then ment means mind. So they're talking about from the sacrum to the mind. That's the entire chakra system. That word came into existence because of the model of the ancient model.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the other two as well they talk about the same thing. So
Wow.
it's all there, it's there for us to see, and just how much we're paying attention. And I think it's important to try to maintain as much humility as possible and open-mindedness, but always keep that information in the back of your head because you never know when you might need it.
I call that the proverbial back shelf. I tuck stuff up on that shelf, and eventually, I always say it's either going to come to light in one way or another. It's going to be proven true or untrue, or maybe information that I need, like you said, in the future. I think you said something really powerful there, though, Dave. Anything that you look at from the past to start counting, because I think that's important. I think there were a lot of messages left, and not necessarily in words, because then you transcend language differences too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, if you know astrology, the other thing I'm looking at from the very beginning when I go to an ancient site is for the alignments. And they knew what they were doing, guys. That's why they were genius cultures. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the stuff the Mayans, what we were obviously with their calendar and everything, they had all this knowledge. So, you know, then the question from there, you know, the first, as far as I'm concerned, I know they had the knowledge. And now the next question is, uh, how did it happen this way? Why did it happen this way? And that's when you start going to other topics, such
Mm-hmm.
as extraterrestrial intelligence or metaphysics or the spirit world or whatever you want to talk about, you know?
I just want to answer somebody from Maker Movies. He said, I assume this is pre-recorded. It's not, it's live. So we're just finishing up with this. So if you've got questions, fire away. We got a few more minutes
Yep.
left.
Okay, well, I'm done, Lorilei. So any
Okay.
questions I'm happy to
That was
take.
interesting because, like I said, I know for some people they might have found it a little heavy. Okay, you pretty well broke it down very easily for people to see. And the thing is, like, obviously, that's not astrology. That's all there is to it. There's a lot more to it. But I see why you did it the way that you did it, was to equate it to something physical in the world as well as science, and for people to realize that it's all interconnected, interrelated. But I think you touched on some really important points that I don't think people realize. Like, we didn't get a chance to get into birth charts and things like that. But like you said, there's specific periods in time, say during the year and what have you, when it's a better time. Like, I forget who we. Oh, it was our friend Kathy Bilski. She's another fellow light worker who has a show, Quantum Leap, I believe it is, on Friday nights here, and she's going to be having Earth. It's called Earth Enlightenment, and it's a special thing she's going to be having on December 24th. And there was a specific time when she chose that date because somebody that knew astrology said it was a perfect time. And Dave, you were talking to her in the chat that night. She was on my show, and you go, "Yeah, that is a good date, right?"
Yeah, that's the one. Well, and of course, if we're talking about her personal birth chart, it's what's called aspects, which is angles that your birthday makes with other days of the year. And there's things that are called trines and sextiles and squares, and all these angles have different associations with them. And I think for her, it might be partly because of that. But actually, what I had just described in the presentation is that the 24th or the 25th, that's when you actually start. That's the first day
Yeah.
that you actually start gaining light, because the
Yes.
21st is when it stops. And
Mm-hmm.
then when it starts again, it's the 24th or 25th, which is
Yeah,
3
that's
1/3
what you
days.
said. I just remember as soon as you said the date, I went, "Oh yeah, that's right." Now, Maker Movies from YouTube says knowledge is frowned upon. What's your thoughts on that statement, Dave?
Well, I guess it depends. It's one of those things that we could even reference from the beginning of the conversation. It depends on who you're talking to. It
Mm-hmm.
depends on what you're using the knowledge for. That's a
Mm-hmm.
big one. It's your orientation of it. If you're going to use it to do good things or bad things,
Mm-hmm.
and unfortunately, it's a little difficult on Earth because there's so many systems, so many structures, power structures that they're not all helpful to humans. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of things that prevent us from being our full selves, etc. And those people, the people who would be in power in those instances, they don't really want you to have certain types of knowledge, because then it's difficult for them to stay in power.
That's true.
So
So
if
he said, "Call me Ray." No, I was just going to add to that. You're so right. But the thing I think we need to look back on always is history. And again, right at the beginning when we talked about this, Dave, about asking why, asking based on what, and then look at the information that's been left even by the Mayans. There's many ancient civilizations that have left many things for us, right? Like, I got into a bit of history on the weekend talking about the Great Flood. What were we talking about? I forgot that you thought it might be a remnant of Sodom and Gomorrah, and I forget what I had asked, what it was about now. Do you remember that when we were
that
talking about that?
yeah, that was I think it was the Dead Sea, right?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the Dead Sea, because we were talking about the Dead Sea and what it looks like from up above. There's high levels of radiation. Then we got into the Anunnaki. We didn't even get into ET tonight, guys, and stuff like that, because that's something else Dave and I talk quite a bit about when we're not, not doing a show. But there's so many things, and it's almost like everything on this planet. Once I think you begin to wake up or open your eyes and start looking around, asking questions, realizing we're all sovereign beings, we can all think for ourselves, be critical thinkers, you start realizing that you really can't separate anything on this earth. It's all kind of interrelated in this complicated puzzle, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And you know what I say is that I say all the time is that actually we can understand a lot, really, really and truly. I mean, the personal things that you want to take, the directives for your life, that's going to vary a lot between people. But in terms of the system, how the system works,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, it would be literally impossible for me to do this presentation if I wasn't also a biologist. You
Mm-hmm.
have to understand the body structures. You have to
Mm-hmm.
understand how energy moves, which is not, again, not something that you're going to learn in Western medical school. I
Mm-hmm.
want to know about the meridians. I want to know about the chakra system. I want to know, you know, if there's if you go to China and I would love to go to China um,
Mm-hmm.
because of the wisdom that's contained there. But
Yeah.
if you have a block in a part of your body, you apply some pressure, you're breaking up that dense fluid or the
Mm-hmm.
dense energy knot, we can
Mm-hmm.
call it, and then now the chi can flow freely through that
Okay,
part of your body and complete the circuit.
now you're talking my language. I don't know if I've shown you this, Dave. I might have. But when I was in university to become a nurse, what I would use, because I knew it used a different part of the brain, just like singing uses a different part of the brain. But I had something called the anatomy coloring book. So you were talking about all the, the nerves and the muscles, and then you get into finer nerves and what have you. It had pictures of this that you could color and associate with the name, right, to help you memorize it. I have a coloring book that deals with exactly what you're talking about, the whole chakra system, the chi lines or key lines, depending on who says it, the meridian lines, the whole bit to help you learn all about this. And even though I say I always come from a big pharma background, I always refer to Eastern medicine. Now there's a place for both, but I believe, just like what you were saying in your presentation and even earlier, Dave, that these civilizations have been around a lot longer than the Western world. And there's something to it because they've done a lot of healing, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, in terms of what I've been able to piece together for myself, I mentioned a little earlier, but the powerhouse or the center of the Western world, um, before it kind of moved over to the American continents, was Egypt, and it moved from Egypt into Europe, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then you had a different center of the Eastern world, which was India,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why they ended up developing their separate astrological systems. But actually, I mean, I need to mention this too because Mesopotamia, which was supposedly the first human civilization that
Mm-hmm.
left records for us on the planet. Well,
Right.
the supposedly, and I actually would have to say I do agree with this, is that the glyphs, which are the symbols, if you guys have
Mm-hmm.
seen your symbols for your
Mm-hmm.
astrology sign, they come out of Mesopotamia, and then they moved into Egypt. But all the astrologers, the best astrologers, I fully believe, were probably from Mesopotamia, and I think they brought that into Egypt. But the remnant of Egypt, when I say Egypt, I'm talking specifically about the Great Pyramids,
Mm-hmm.
um, was, I believe, well before Mesopotamia. So I think
Interesting.
that was an outlier of Atlantis personally.
Mm-hmm.
And when Atlantis disappeared or went down, or however you want to explain it, people went to all sides of the Atlantic Ocean, and then they started to populate the coastlines. I'll share something really fast. How long do we actually have, Florley?
Probably about another minute or two, but go ahead.
Okay, I'll just make this really fast. If
It's
there's one
already
last
10
question,
after 11, but I know we started a few minutes late. So,
yeah. Okay, well, I think that this is something that might interest people a lot. I've thought about it for a very long time. And there's this relic of type of music and dance in Western Europe that is the best association would be probably with Irish step dance.
Oh, okay.
And
Mhm.
I'm also a musician. I don't know if we talked about this, but
No,
I've
you
been a
have not told
musician.
me that. I learned something new about you.
Right. Yep. So anyway, it's very interesting because right in the same coastline you have you also have the Spanish, the flamenco, which is a
Mhm.
very similarly stylized dance with the
Mhm.
feet, very complex, fast rhythmic music. It's all on this push all the way to the west of Europe. So you've got the Spanish influence, you've got the Irish influence that has this. You also have the Basque influence, which, as we know, it's a very mysterious group of people with the whole RH blood question as well.
Mhm.
We can get into that some other time, but they have a very, very beautiful, somewhat similar style of dance and somewhat similar style of music. And I look around the entire world and I'm like, where on earth did this come from? And by the way, we don't know where their language came from at all. It's not related to anywhere else in Europe, the Basque language. And I kind of went into a meditative state and I just asked, I said, where does this
Mhm.
come from? And what I got was that it's from Atlantis and that these people are
Oh.
the original Atlanteans. The people, beautiful. I mean, you have to imagine that Atlantis was an incredibly developed, beautiful culture. All the arts had been perfected, everything of this
Mhm.
nature. Their dance, there's nothing, it's perfect. When I was a kid, I saw them and I said, there's something very, very sacred in what they're doing. And the music is very simple but very complex at the same time. They were pulling when they put this together. They were pulling very very divine types of energies to make this into a system, and I think that came from Atlantis. And that's a good topic actually for the next show, Atlantis.
That's really interesting. All I'll add is my very close friend Seraphine, who we used to do Tripping the Void, is on hiatus right now. Believe it or not, her father, who has since passed, is Basque. So we'll have to maybe pick her
Oh,
brain
okay.
and have her on here. It was interesting you mentioned it. I'm going to read Ray's last comment here. He says, history is his story. I'm Dutch, by the way, so Germanic languages are very accessible to me. Thank you so much for joining us, you guys. As you see, we could listen to Dave all night long. He is like a fountain of knowledge. I'm gonna have him back on because I want to get in birth charts. I want to get into it with him all about Oak Island, about ETs. Like we've got so much to talk about, so I'm sure he's going to be on here quite a few times, Dave, if you're okay with it.
Oh, of course, yeah, I'm ready anytime. Yep.
Okay, so where can they find you? Because you teach this, you do birth charts, and guys, birth charts are important because some of the stuff we talked about, like Dave said, depending on when you were born, that you're able to point out like many things that could help people with their life when navigating where they're going, decisions they're making, and what have you, right?
Yeah, exactly. And a birth chart is the exact it's the exact locations of the planets and the
Mm-hmm.
stars at an exact time of the year, which
Mm-hmm.
is your birthday, and the time matters. It's very important as
Mm-hmm.
well. And what happens is that gets copied. The entire sky literally gets copied, stamped into your body, and that you live with that. You live with your own solar system your entire life. That's what it is. It's your own.
Mm-hmm.
Really, it's your own solar system, and that's
Mm-hmm.
actually when it gets into quantum physics as well, because that's your solar system. So
Wow.
when you go around and you're talking with other people, they have a different solar system that's been stamped in them.
Mm-hmm.
And the things that we do share in common though is the backdrop, which is like we don't have time this time, but that's like the age that you're in, the age of Pisces or the age of Aquarius. We're all in that age,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the current state of the sky. But actually, the more important state of the sky is the one that you were born under, and that's stamped into all of your cellular structure, all of your mental structure.
Wow.
It's in invisible parts of your body. So yeah, that's right. And what the birth chart can do, it tells you about how you are when you're active, how you are when you're passive. It tells you about your personality, it tells you about your strengths and challenges and karma and everything. And it's a big claim, but I have no problem making it. It is a science,
Mm-hmm.
and people will be absolutely shocked at how accurate it is.
Plus, you also teach how to do this. So, where can they find you, Dave? If they want to get a hold of you, they got more questions, they want to take some lessons from you, or possibly get their birth chart done.
Yeah, sure. Well, probably the best place is Facebook. It's my full name. It's Dave Petrella. That's P like Peter, Etrella. I'm on Instagram as under Dave Petrella 12. Um, Those are probably the best. I guess if you want to send me an email, you can do that. DavePetrella@hotmail.com. I'm also on LinkedIn under Dave Petrella. So any of
I
those
found him.
four. Right. And that's actually, yeah, that's why I brought it up too. I said, well, that's another good way to
Yep.
contact me if people don't have the other ones.
I want to thank you so much for being here. I want to thank everybody that was here live listening and making the great comments that you have. I want to let you know if you can get a hold of me on facebook.com/the Angel Rock. Also, I have two groups on Facebook, Paranormal University for all things paranormal. And then I have the Angel Rocker Tribe for many of the things Dave and I talked about tonight, including energy and more on chakras, you name it, how to access your spirit guides, power of the positivity of the mind, you name it. So I want to thank you all for being here. Like I said, I will see you next Monday, same time, same space. So 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern. And I haven't worked on a guest next week. We'll see. I'm working on some things, so it'll be a surprise next week. But again, thank you so much. Please remember to share, and especially don't forget to click the like button if you're on our YouTube channels. We have three, but the main one is UFO Paranormal Radio Network. There's UFO Gods and Extraterrestrials, and I always forget the third one. I'm sorry, Joe. Anyways, guys, thank you so much. I send you all so much love and light. Thanks, Dave, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Lorilei. Thanks to everyone who's listening. I appreciate it, guys.
Have a good one.
Yep, you too.